Lastly, what kind of secularism is actually required for a country like India? First, we begin with what the actual definition of secularism is. This definition of secularism is adopted in most of the Western countries. It means that state or any individual which is the part of the state has no relation with any of the religious activities being performed in a particular country. Interestingly, this is not the thing in India. We all know. All the political parties are very closely associated with the religious groups of this country. Then why was the word secular adopted in India and what it meant? When the Constitution of India was incorporated on 26th January 1950, word secular was not there. Was India not secular at that time? I don't think so. Islam existed in 1947. Christianity also existed in 1947 and other religions as well. Then why the word secular was not there? It was in 1977 when then Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi incorporated the words secular and socialist in the Indian Constitution. It was a 42nd amendment and during the time of emergency. Was there some other motive behind it? We don't know. What was the clear definition of secularism for the constitution of a country like India? We don't know because it was not defined. Then what was the real motive behind it? Now we'll see what the present situation of religions is in a country like India and why we require secularism.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. This feels nice. Should have come for the election. Regardless, so before we proceed with the rest of our presentation, I would like to just set what the scene is right now in India. So we talk about minorities. So here I have simplified it a lot. I have not included Christianity and Jainism and Buddhism into separate sects. It's just very simple. So so as you can see, 14% people are Muslims. They are what the people most concerned with when we talk about minorities. So every one of us knows about India's population, right? So if you just use a bit of logic, so 14% of a population as huge as ours is a lot, right? So when you put it into perspective, we actually hold like 10% of the world's Muslim population. So that's like a lot of people. And if we do not take into account secularism, we can say that we are serving the majority of the people, which are the Hindus, whatever policies we draft or anything. So if you just say that they are minority, they are still a lot of people. We are not talking about percentages anymore. There are a lot of people. India is like the third, we've got the third largest Muslim population, right? After Indonesia and Pakistan. So so that's what the thing is about. If we just say that let's go forward with the majority, we are at the end of it all, we are not really pleasing a lot of people, not a percentage of people, but a lot of people. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say right now, and my friend Ajit will proceed and about how hypocritical our secularism is.
Thank you, Nikhil. Indian secularism is two-faced. When I think about the secularism which is followed by our nation, there are many questions that come into my mind. There are mainly 52 Muslim countries in the world. Show one Muslim country which provides Hajj subsidy. Show one country where 85% of majority craves for the indulgence of 15% minority. Christians and Muslim schools can teach Bible and Quran. Why can't Hindu schools can teach Gita and Ramayana? Why there is no uniform civil code? Why there is different laws for different religions? So the question remains the same. Why others can and Hindus can't? From here my friend Harsha will take over.
So done with the introduction, so let's see what we are losing by this pseudo-secularism. So yoga, which has its roots embedded in the Indian context, has been questioned in the US, and then a Californian judge ruled out the parents' question, saying that yoga is promoting Eastern culture or Eastern religion, and this yoga has been practiced in USA. And now what we being the founders of yoga are stuck at? We are stuck at a discussion or a debate where yoga is being seen as a promotion of Hindu culture. And this is not being allowed to be promoted in schools in the form of physical education, despite having huge health benefits. And at the peak of this, ISRO chairman, Mr. Radhakrishnan, when the Mangalyaan is going to be launched, he has gone to his deity. He, being a Hindu, he has gone to Tirupati to offer prayer to his god, and he has taken a small model of this Mangalyaan satellite there. And then he was ridiculed by the people, so-called radical people, saying that how can someone who represents a state or someone who represents the government can take a stand on a religion like this. He was said that he was promoting Hindu culture and he is being unconstitutional by doing this. And while we are stuck with the discussion at this level, CERN, the biggest physics laboratory in the world, has set up a huge Nataraja statue in front of their laboratory. They don't have any relation to Nataraja statue, but they have put up a huge statue of Nataraja in front of their laboratory just to honor the Indian community that is working over there. And then coming to the Constitution. The Constitution of India nowhere defines that a community can be considered as a minority. But it has provision saying that a community or minority can be defined on the basis of language or religion. So far so clear, but what's going on in reality? So when Hindus who have been minorities in 7 states and 1 union territory have claimed that they are minorities and they deserve the rights of minorities, the Supreme Court has declined their plea. Why is this happening? We don't know. And coming to the Indian logic, as we call it, secularism by principle is something that separates a state from the religious institutions. That is, a state cannot indulge in any religious practices or cannot promote any religious practices. But then when we compare the laws for Muslims and Hindus, what's going on? Muslims can promote or can say out their prayers in loudspeakers 5 times a day, 365 days a year, and no one bats an eye about it. But then what happens when Hindus want to celebrate 9 days of Navaratri? The court says you can't have loudspeakers after 10 p.m. And to the heights of hypocrisy, a secularism is something that gives equal rights to all religions. And what did our Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, say about this? He said he wants to bring up the minorities. It's good. But then he went on to say a huge statement. He said that Muslims are going to have the first rights of resources in India. I don't understand how this is giving equal rights to all religions. Now let's see what Anshu has to offer.
Hello. I would like to take you through the slide where I would discuss why secularism is important for minorities in India. So, being a human being, the first thing that we care about is our existence. So, the secularism gives the assurance and the legitimate place to minorities in our country. After existence, we focus on the basic needs that we require, our socio-economic development as a human being. Also, by the Maslow's hierarchy laws, the physiological need is the basic need of a human being: food, clothing, and shelter. So when we talk about these things, Indian state has fallen short of recognizing and actively addressing the socio-economic rights of minorities, especially the Muslims. After these, we focus on the education. So as you can see from the data given in the slide, that the percentage of illiterate in Hindu community is 36.4. It is 32.4 for Sikhs, 28.2 for Buddhists, 25.6 for Christians, and 42.7 for Muslims, which is way higher than in comparison to the other communities in our country. After getting educated, we look for employment, job to support ourselves and our families. So when we talk about
the Indian job market, whether be public or private, we can also see that there is a mere contribution from the minority, not the contribution, actually they only constitute only 2.67% at the higher management levels, or like the directors or the senior executives in a firm. So it was a ET, Economics Times Group Analysis Survey, and the data are given in the slides. Also, when we talk about the political situation in the present context in our country, the number of Muslims in the political sphere is very less. Only 22 Muslims were elected in Lok Sabha in 2017. So, what is the solution to the problem that we have, the absurdity of secularism in India? For this, we, the younger generation, need to appreciate and respect other religions as we respect our own. But when we think about this, the two questions that come in our mind is, how many Muslims in India are able to appreciate the feelings that we have, the sanctity that we have for Lord Rama's birthplace, the Hindus have especially, and conversely it also applies to the Hindus, that how many Hindus understand the emotional trauma that a Muslim goes through when they see that the mosque is being destroyed brick by brick. So my team and I'd like to take a stand here by saying that we need to respect and appreciate every religion present in our country, their tradition and culture, and also to see the secularism in India with a new and dynamic approach. Thank you.
Okay, time for quick questions. There should be many, right?
So, hi Nikhil. I'd like to ask you, your topic was secularism. I'm in Zamam Hussain, secondary. So, the topic was secularism, and from your presentation it was made out to be more about Hindus versus Muslims. So, that's primarily because 14% of our population in our context is a very large number. But I'd like to point out that 3% of that large number is also a very large number. So Christians constitute about 3% of our population.
They do. Okay,
just a second, let me complete. And the second part was the Uniform Civil Code that you were talking about. So in a country as diverse as India, how do you propose we make helmet compulsory for Sikhs? That's the point. In a country as diverse as our country, having a Uniform Civil Code in certain areas can pose certain problems. So your question was, why do we not have a Uniform Civil Code? So I think that's one of the very minor reasons why we cannot have one in the first place. Thanks.
Okay, I'll come to your first point first. So when we say Muslims, it's not because we are particularly targeting Muslims, right? Obviously there are a lot of other, when 14% of a population is so big, obviously 6% of that population is also big, so is 1%, right? That's what you're getting at. So it was just for the convenience of putting our views forward, because see, whatever we said about secularism, so by meaning, it means that all religions are treated equally, right? That's the basic fund of it. So we are saying Muslims, but whatever applies for Muslims would apply for the rest 6% as well, right? So okay. Okay, I don't know. So this would be my personal view, not my group. But then when I'm talking to people, I would rather say Muslims or who it affects more, numerically, as compared to saying every time, Muslims, Christians, and.
But I don't think secularism has to be interpreted in terms of percentage. It is a principle. Even if it is 1%, not even percentage, this concept should take care of that individual liberty, right? If we go back saying that, what is the percentage of the population, religious representation of that, and then accordingly we would divide the things, there is a philosophical problem there. Even if it is one individual, and my constitution should safeguard the safety and dignity to live in this country as others do. That's the main point, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's a 14%, 6%, or 3%, or even 0.005%. So there's a problem there, right?
Yes,
so how do you tackle that?
So that's what we are saying.
And
because-
often, in fact, he has rightly pointed out, this discussion actually becomes Hindu versus Muslim. Who is, who is suffering and
Sir,
why.
I'll give you some. I'll tell you something. What happens when we do research on these kind of things? Most of the you take examples, right? So most of the examples will come from mostly Hindu and Muslim. Whatever things have been going on in the past. So there aren't a lot. If you were to tell me to put forward, Buddhist versus Hindu, something like that happens.
I would draw your attention to what is happening,
yes,
outside.
So yeah, for example's sake, this is easier. But then again, I get it. We could have framed it in a better manner. But what we meant was not particularly Muslims, but the entire minorities that are there, right? 14 plus 6%, 20% of the minorities that are there.
So
That's what I meant.
according to the data, the illiteracy rate, the data for the illiteracy rate which was given in the slide, it was very high for the Muslims. It was 46%.
Agree, no doubt.
And for Christians and other community, it was 26. So when we talk about minorities, especially in present context, so we get the idea of Muslim and Hindu only. So when we look at the other community which are present in minorities, also the socio-economic development is way higher for other communities as compared to Muslims. I'm not saying that we wanted to showcase it Muslims versus Hindu.
I think
or
you
something
need
like
to
that.
address that. That is a separate question. That is a completely separate question than secularism. Why particular community, religious community is say lagging behind. That is a different question, and we need to address them differently. The concept of secularism, says something else. You need to understand that.
Yeah, and to answer your question of uniform civil code, that question was there just to show the two sides of Indian secularism. There are people out there who are questioning that why we don't have uniform civil code, and there are people out there who say that we don't need a uniform civil code because it's not possible. India is such a diverse nation. So in the end, in the last slide, as you could see, we actually said that you need to be sensitive to needs of different religions. So that's what our stand is. We do not stand for a uniform civil code because that's not possible in a country like India. So maybe that answers your question.
This is another question. Can we have uniform civil code yet we can respect individual religious freedom? Is it possible? Okay. All right. Okay. Someone else raised hand, right?
The entire evolution of our constitution and how secularism was included within it. Do you think with our democratic setup, the idea of whether implementing uniform civil code or not, is it possible to achieve the highest form of secularism? Especially I'm talking about vote bank politics, democracy, diversity in democratic parties, and how are they addressing the issue?
See, depends what kind of definition of secularism you are adopting. The definition which is actually being followed in Western countries, as I stated earlier, is not possible in India because state is very closely related to the religious setup in India. But yes, if we define secularism as upliftment of all the minority religions, because that is the only way we can treat all religions equal. That is very much achievable if we have proper kind of policies which are actually being implemented right now. So maybe not in a utopian world, but yes, certain level of secularism is very much possible in India.
So like you rightly pointed out in your presentation, So like you rightly pointed out in your presentation, secularism actually means separating the state from religious identity. But your entire presentation focused on how communities react and behave towards each other rather than how the state actually promotes or does not promote a particular religion. Except for one or two statements by Manmohan Singh or examples, most it was centered around that. So perhaps I would like you to answer this, how the state has been sponsoring particular religions. And secondly, in the last slide when you mentioned there was a very small population of Muslims elected to the Lok Sabha, do you actually propose religious, maybe reservation for minorities in that sense? Because that would not be secular. No, so is that right for a secular state? Do you want a particular section to be reserved for minorities?
It's not right for a secular state, but when we as a nation have diverse culture and communities, and when we want everyone to progress and proceed, then we'll have to care about every community.
Okay, wait. I'll just.
They were elected.
I'll just put it in a bit more simple manner. So imagine this hall, 100 people, and there are two of you. There are only two girls. Okay. Imagine you are not a girl, you are a separate religion, and there's a council to be elected, and you know that inherently people have this tendency to first of all at least consider people of their own kind, right? Now there are just two of you in auditorium full of people. So what are your odds of actually representing at least the two of you either? Very less, right? The odds are less. So even though we are saying secularism is, conceptually you can say that we do not segregate them or differentiate them in any manner. However, when you come to actual practice, it differs a lot. So I hope you get the example, right? Because you won't be represented equally if you are that less in number. So we need to have something. That's what she was saying. So I have a feeling if I repeat that, I might get confused myself.
So your first question was that whether the state, what secularism is, that state is not related to the religious activities. By the very beginning, and that is not the Indian Constitution adopted, and they clearly stated that. Because that's not possible in a country like India. And when we say how state is actually working towards these religious activities, see all these radical groups we have, like RSS or we have from the Muslim side. So they are very closely working at the ground level to actually change the political setup of a country. And that state is actually working with the religion.
Hello. You mentioned that you emphasized on the part that there are 85 Islamic countries and none provide subsidy on Hajj. 58 Islamic country and none provide subsidy on Hajj. But none of the countries enjoy so much religious diversity as India. What's the problem if you're giving subsidy to a committee? What's the problem?
No problem. That's what we were trying to say. There were two questions which said how India is promoting or how India is helping the minorities, and then two questions which are saying why Hindus are not able to do this. Do you think when state promotes something that is embedded in the Hindu religion, like someone wants to go to Ayodhya, let's say some Varanasi, if state starts giving subsidy for this, do you think with this piece? Yeah. Yeah, precisely. But Hindus are being portrayed as someone who are oppressing the minorities, where it's not the case. That's what we tried to show with those 4 questions.
That why are you emphasizing that why we are giving subsidy? What's the problem with giving subsidy to a minority? That's what I'm asking. For Mansarovar also that Hindus are getting subsidies. It's not the problem with only a minority.
We never said that it's a problem. We are actually taking a stand that something needs to be done to uplift the minority religions of this country. And if giving subsidies a way out, then the state is doing it. We never questioned that. We were just showing the two sides of the Indian secularism that is being followed in this country. Yeah, maybe we portrayed it in a wrong way, but that was our actual motive.
And explanations we are giving, because they have some of those explanations probably in their slides. So let's keep our patience, and curiosity intact, so that, other groups also get to address some of your questions and all those things. But at the same time, when you deal with this kind of topic, which can be controversial in nature, you need to do more research. You lack in there. I must openly state that to you. Okay. So please do your research a little more in depth. Thank you. Section B.